Welcome to the Atomic Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Osborn, and on this podcast, we interview successful business owners for them to share atomic and powerful lessons that they've learned throughout the course of their business and then share them with us so that we can learn from them as well. As always, this show is sponsored by the LinkedIn Reverse Podcast Method, the new way for closing deals that doesn't rely on any of the old traditional methods that everybody hates. We use this method to book 26 qualified leads and sales calls in 10 days without any ad spend, outreach, or endless social media posting. To find out more, direct message me on LinkedIn to have a chat. That's Jason A. Osborn. The link to that will be in the show notes below. But on today's show, our special guest is Tony Martignetti, which I hope I said his last name correctly. He's the owner of Inspired Purpose Partners, where he is providing leadership and workplace cultural advisory, as well as keynote speaking and coaching. So, Tony, thanks so much for being on the show today. And I want to start off with asking a question that I always love to start with, which is this. If you were able to go back when you started your business 8 years ago and were able to start over again, but you knew what you know now, what would you do differently in the first 12 months?
Well, what a great question. I love that. I would say that the real starting point for me is to know that the gateway to real success is connecting with others. Even finding ways to collaborate with people in the same field. And ultimately, that has been a great path for me. Now that I look back, I wish I'd done more of that. I just want to add one more thing, which is this quote that I always think about when I think about this concept, and that is that amateurs compete and professionals create. And so I've chosen the creative path now.
Yeah, I love that. When you talk about collaboration, what are one or two things that you changed in the way that you collaborate that's helped you to get to where you are right now?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes people over-index on supporting others and like they give a lot in order to support people's growth and to help people get what they need. And so I'm definitely one of those people who was like, how can I help? But I also realized that sometimes I gave myself up in the process. I gave up all of the energy that I could give to a collaboration. And so it's always about finding that balance, seeing how, not to say what's in it for me, but you have to be thinking that way in some ways to say, how can I make sure that this is a yes and not just another thing? Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Talking about that as you collaborate and grow and scale in what you're doing, what's the hardest part of scaling your business without have becoming like spammy or selling in the way that you're promoting and marketing?
Yeah, and I think it's a great add-on from what we just said about, this idea that how can you find other people who complement but don't do exactly the same thing you do, but also, finding ways to amplify each other in the process. Because it's tough, like, especially for people who don't feel like bragging about themselves, like that's just something it's inherently hard, at least
Mm,
for me.
yeah. Around that bragging bit, and this is a really interesting thing because I work with a lot of businesses and help them with their marketing and stuff. And one of the biggest, I think, challenges that people have is being able to communicate what they do because often don't realize how good they are at what they do. And so they undersell themselves. What have you done to be able to communicate in a powerful way that you do that might feel embarrassing, but it's still true, but you're not having that false humility where it's like, well, I'm not going to tell anyone, but you're still getting it out there, letting people know you're still good at what you do.
It's a great question. And I think what's cool about it is that you know, I think about myself, but I also think about what I see a lot online is the sense um, of trying to put on this picture of vulnerability, but yet not being in service of the people who
Yeah.
you're supporting. And so if you're just going to say like, hey, I screwed up the other day and this is what I did, or even the opposite, which is to say, look how great I am. The key thing is to make sure that there's what's in it for them. What's the value that you're going to provide? If you're value oriented, then what happens is people start to see, oh, every time I talk to this guy or this, this person in general, I feel as though I'm leaving better off from the
Mhm.
conversation. I have some note or tidbit that I can action on, and maybe even just feeling a little more inspired.
Yeah. Yeah. But which leads me on to kind of the next question here, because I'm very much about relationship led
Mhm.
building how your business is and all that stuff. What's been the one thing you changed in how you build relationships to make the whole lead generation and prospecting process feel easier for you?
Yeah, I don't think I've figured it out yet, but I'm still on that journey. But I would say the one thing that I did figure out is that, you can't uh, be holding yourself back. You can't continue to say like, oh, well, they don't want to hear from me. You have to continue to stay in it and be responsive to the relationship you're building, making sure that you don't just let it die and then pop up when you need something. You have to
Mhm.
nurture relationships all along the arc of your business. And through that process, people leave with a much better impression of who you are, and that leads
Mhm.
to more business.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when it comes to the nurturing side, one of the big things that most business really struggle with is that follow up. They find it pestering or whatever. And I always find it really interesting when I'm following up. Sometimes I have people actually reply back to me and say, "Hey, fair play for following up. Like,
Yeah.
thanks." Even if they're not ready to purchase from me now. So that whole like nurturing element, is there anything that you do to keep that in place so that you are nurturing the relationships and just not letting the like really good people slip through the net?
Oh, and I just love the way you describe this because there's something about that follow-up where we do feel a little bit icky. Like, why am I doing this? And are people ignoring me? Is it time to move on? But ultimately, we have to also be thinking about how are we serving them by following up? And I've heard that multiple times where people say like, oh, I'm so glad you followed up because things got so crazy and I just didn't get a chance to respond. So we
Mhm.
can't be blaming people for not responding. We have to be okay with doing the follow-up and through that process also see what you can do to add along the way. I mean, if it's like if I'm going to follow up to somebody and say, hey, I've been thinking about you, what have you, and this is something that I wrote recently that I think might resonate. And so they're not feeling like they're being sold to per se, but they feel like this person really cares and they're willing to add
Mhm.
value without having the money flow in their direction yet.
Mhm.
And now that you know my secrets, I've
Well,
been
no,
found
but
out.
no, but I think that's great. I think it's a really unique perspective on it. Because when you are looking at just adding the value side of it, it's
Yeah.
really helpful. And not all follow-ups necessarily require that. It guys depends on the conversations you have with them, but just being able to look at how you add value to people is so important with that. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
great.
And I just want to
So
add, like, one of the things that I've been conscious about is like, I've been on the other side of the table, so I want to make sure that when people reach out to me, that I'm not just ignoring it, that I'm actually doing the work to say, hey, I hear you. And even if now is not the right time for us to connect or have a conversation, I just want to make sure that they understand that I at least receive and honor their outreach.
yeah, I'm the same as well. Like if someone's just cold spamming me, I don't really reply to those. But if I've had an actual communication with them, I don't ignore those emails or messages, because it's at least I try not to. If I have, it's just an accident. But I think that's really important what you said as well, because it just helps people know, where things are. No, that's really good. Well, one of the other things I love to ask Tony, because as a business owner, it can be lonely. We all have challenges, and oftentimes we can think we're the only ones that are going through that, or why am I the only one dealing with this? So I like to kind of normalize this. So like we all go through stuff. Let's share what we've gone through, so we can go, oh, I'm not the only one. So having said all that, what's the number one biggest challenge that you've faced in your business so far, and what's the lesson that you've learned from that?
Yeah, I mean, I can be the worst in terms of beating myself up, of like feeling like, oh, I'm not getting where I need to go, and when you're stuck in this world of like you said, the loneliness of being a business, an entrepreneur, or solopreneur, whatever you want to call it, is the challenges that we get into an echo chamber of our own making. And so sometimes you just say like, who do I need to reach out to that's going to get me unstuck here? Who's going to get me thinking a little more open and seeing possibilities? And I think that is a beautiful thing when we say, okay, look, if I'm feeling stuck, who can I reach out to who's going to get me to at least see things differently?
Mhm.
And maybe it's just a simple like, hey, you're on the right track. Keep going, do your thing, and everything's gonna be fine. That's all I
Yeah.
need.
Yeah. No, yeah. Great advice there for sure. Well, over the next 2 to 3 years of your business, what would you like to achieve? What are your goals?
Yeah, I'm launching my next book this year, which is a very important piece for me because it really is a connection to like what my journey was, but also what I've seen in others. And it's called Illuminating Hidden Brilliance. It's an exploration of, the sideline parts of who we are and how do we bring them back into the table so that we can be more fully expressed, but also feel more alive in the process. And
Mhm.
so that's what I'm working on. I'm also developing a mastermind that's called Illumination Council, which aligns with the book, to take some of the learnings from the book to another level with people who really want to expand their thinking with others. And so that's the two things that I'm working on.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. That's really cool. Well, for people that are wanting to learn a little bit more about you and get in touch with you, what's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, the best place would be LinkedIn is the first place I always recommend because I'm always active there. You can find me Tony Martignetti with a one at the end, not an I. And then also my website. I've got a new website which I just put together. It's called tonymspeaks.com. So I've made some shifts from the Inspired Purpose Partners into my speaking page. Both of them are great destinations, but kind of directing you towards the new one.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I definitely recommend everyone checking out Tony's LinkedIn as well as the website he just mentioned there as well. And yeah, Tony, thank you so much for being on the show. Some great little tidbits of information around that you've shared with that. Thank you for sharing just the stories and lessons you've learned in the course of your business so far. So thanks so much for that. And as a reminder to everyone listening, the show is sponsored by the LinkedIn Reverse Podcast Method, the new way to close deals that doesn't rely on any of the old traditional methods that everybody hates. To find out more, send me a direct message on LinkedIn. That's Jason A. Osborn. The link to that will be in the show notes below. And until next episode, stay inspired.